So Europe is preparing for a severe heat storm with a second heat wave pushing temperatures even higher in the coming days and triggering warnings for tourists planning to travel for the school holidays. Rome was bracing itself for an unprecedented 43 degrees, which would surpass its previous record of 40.5 set in August 2007. Temperatures across the country are around 8 degrees hotter than usual for this time of year. British holidaymakers have been told to prepare for extreme heat as they travel south when the school term finishes this week. In a few moments' time, we'll get Ben Pyle's view on some of this. But first, Dale Vince, founder of EcoTricity, green entrepreneur, is a regular with us on the programme. Always helps us out with these kind of stories. Afternoon to you, Dale.
Yeah, afternoon, Ian. It's good to be back.
Good to have you with us. I mean, let's just put that to one side for a second, because there actually is a really important news story this day, and I think we would be remiss not to mention. And the headline is stunning. I can't wait to hear the detail here. You are about to begin the UK's first electric airline. Surely not?
The world's first, as it happens, yes,
Wow.
but it is true.
So what's the detail here? Are you flying planes to Malacca by the weekend? What's going on?
Not yet. So we're just in the process of getting a license from the Civil Aviation Authority, getting some routes, landing and takeoff slots and stuff like that. We'll get our first planes early next year and start to fly for 1 year on kerosene, while the engines, the electric engines that we want, go through a certification process themselves. They'll be with us in early 25, and at that point we'll be a fully electric airline running on electricity made from hydrogen on board the plane.
So this isn't like a little drone that you're flying up there. We're not going to all go to the launch day and people like me are going to be standing there waiting for this 747 to take off, only for you to come out with a remote control.
Yeah, so our first planes will have 19 seats and a range of 300 miles, and we'll fly all across the UK, hopefully, if we can get the slots. But we think there are some available because recently, because of the pandemic, obviously the airline industry was badly affected and there were lots of bankruptcies and stuff like that. Our second plane, a year and a half after the first electric ones, will be a 70-seater with a 500-mile range, and then we'll be able to reach Europe. So we will be a European operator in a few years.
That's amazing. So what's in the fuel? So in the fuel tank is what? Water? How does it work? What are in layman's terms, Dale, what does it look like?
So the fuel tank has hydrogen in it, and then we'll use something called a fuel cell. It's technology that's been around for decades. It converts hydrogen to electricity with no emissions at all, except for a little bit of water. That electricity goes to the motors, which we're having made now, and we have an electric plane. And just to say, actually, it's the reason we've chosen hydrogen is because batteries are really heavy. Hydrogen is obviously very light. So there it is.
And does one of these things exist right now? I mean, have they test flown these things?
So the motors exist and they're being test flown now. They've started the process of certification from the CAA, as we have started the process of getting a license. So we're running the two things in parallel. By the time we're in the air, that we'll be almost ready to convert to electric.
So it'll look like, visually, it'll look like an aeroplane, right?
Oh, it is an airplane, and that's part of the beauty of it. We're going to lease existing airplanes that are not new but second-hand, and when the engines become available, we will then upcycle them into electric planes powered by hydrogen. So it's a great reuse of an existing airframe, and very much lower carbon footprint to do it that way as well.
It's an obvious question, but will you be going on the first flight day? Because, I mean, you can understand the genius and the ingenuity behind the engineering of this kind of stuff, and that's incredible. I mean, this will be game-changing. I think it doesn't matter where anybody sits on the environmental debate, most people will go, wow, that's impressive. But to sit on the first one would always carry a little bit of a risk.
I think that's the perception. I definitely have to go on the first one, if only for that reason, although I will be excited to do it anyway. But by the time we fly passengers, these engines will have been through the entire process. And here's the thing, Ian, that's really interesting. A kerosene-powered engine, a conventional aircraft engine, has around 18,000 moving parts. Each of those moving parts is a potential point of failure. Our electric equivalent has just 18, so 1,000 times less, which is going to make it more reliable and cheaper to maintain than what we have now.
When can I turn up, just a final question on this, Dale, to my travel agents and say, I want to fly with Dale Ways or EcoJet or Vince's Wings, whatever we call it. When can that happen?
We'll start flying early 24 on kerosene, and by early 25, we're able to be in the air on electricity. So we'll be selling tickets, I think, from early next year.
While you're with us, Dale, it would be wrong not to mention this. Over there in Europe at the moment, bit of a heat wave going on. It's very hot, but, you know, it is the summer. It gets hot in the summer. Sometimes it's been hotter. Different places are hotter than they've ever been. Do we read anything into this?
Oh, so much so, really. I mean, we broke a global record in the first week of July. The world was hotter than it's ever been in 120,000 years. That should tell us something. And it's only just beginning. El Nino is forming in the southern hemisphere. That will add to the temperatures. As you said, in Europe, they're hitting records after records. We're approaching 50 degrees, which is like simply unbearable. There's a report out last week that says 60,000 people died in Europe from last summer's heat wave. It's expected to be a bigger number this summer because the temperatures are higher already and the summer hasn't started yet. I mean, this is absolutely the climate crisis right before our eyes. You know, we're seeing wildfires and crazy events, and it's not just Europe, it's the whole world.
Do you think, I mean, you say 120,000 years, how do we know that? Because they didn't they weren't judging this stuff back then, right? I mean, I thought it was a man with an old quill, you know, back in the sort of 50s that first started registering this stuff.
1850s is when we began measuring air temperature. You're quite right. And then geologists have a way of looking back at records through ice cores and stuff like that. And, you know, they say this was the global temperature back whenever. You know, we have a great record of global temperatures. And if you look at it, it's really interesting to me. I saw this at COP26 the first time. Somebody showed me a graph of the cyclic nature of global temperatures going back millions of years. And it showed every ice age. There's a periodic ice age. It's about once every 10,000 years. At this point in time, we've stopped heading downwards and we're heading upwards. We've stopped the ice age, which sounds like a good thing, but you've got to worry what it leads to.
But have we just started talking about this stuff? I mean, a couple of years ago, I'm sure somewhere in Europe recorded their hottest temperature of the time. We didn't all lose our minds over that, Dale. I wasn't speaking to you back then going, oh my goodness, look in Nice, it's 42 degrees. It's never been that. 15 years back, we didn't debate it in that kind of way. Now, every time we get, you know, because the climate is a very powerful thing, and some argue, can man really beat the climate's natural evolutionary process? If you took us all off the planet, all cars, didn't drill for any oil, and just observed it from another place in the universe, you'd probably still see strange stuff going on.
Yeah, but we can track that global temperature back through millions of years so we can see our impact. And, you know, we've been very clear about the coming climate crisis for about 30 years. The models have been very accurate for that period of time. It's been known about for longer than that. The oil companies have been denying it. And of course, as the events of extreme weather have increased in frequency in the last, let's say, 10 years, it's become more prominent in the news. We can see it now. It's undeniable. The climate crisis is here, and it's man-made, powered by fossil fuels, which is what makes it absolute madness for Rishi Sunak to plan to drill the North Sea for more fossil fuels. In fact, it's murder. People will die because of this.
But of course, he's not alone in that. There's many other countries around the world that will still continue drilling. We know whether it's the United States, whether it's Pakistan, whether it's China, you know, that drilling carries on.
Yeah, that doesn't justify it, though, in my book.
No, but why is nobody listening? I mean, this is an Armageddon-type argument here, Dale. I'm not saying that as a cheap swipe or anything. I mean, this is serious stuff. Why would no government be taking that so seriously? They took COVID seriously when they thought people were going to die, and some did, but apparently not this. That would lead many people to believe that, well, maybe it's not quite as bad as you're saying.
Yeah, and I think it goes to your earlier point, Ian, that, you know, it's been a little bit hard to believe, let's say, for 20 years ago, 30 years ago, we heard about it, but it seemed to be something that was happening in a different part of the world and or was going to reach us in decades to come. It's accelerated now. The world was forecast to hit the 1.2 degree threshold in about 10 years' time. Sorry, 1.5 degrees, the Paris limit, in about 10 years' time. It's now predicted we'll hit it this year, 10 years early. And so everything's concentrating and increasing in frequency and has become much more apparent. And it's an international consensus, a scientific and political consensus that we have to stop drilling for more oil. The UN calls it economic and moral madness to drill for fossil fuels. The International Energy Agency have said that we have to stop doing it. You know, there's an abundance of evidence and opinion that says we have to stop this. Rishi Sunak has gone against government policy in doing this. We haven't drilled in the North Sea for years, and we were never going to do it again. This is a new thing from the Conservative government, and, you know, I'll stop there.